We're actually in a series called It Is, and today we're talking about It Is Finished, and hopefully you caught that in the music set and the worship time today, that we have something to celebrate. And matter of fact, today is just one of those days. We do it every Sunday because it's just the nature of who we are, celebrate what Jesus has done for us. But this is just one of those times. It's one of those moments where we set aside this weekend, this time, this holiday, to really celebrate the significance of what was so different about Jesus Christ and and what he offered us, and really what changed everything. And it wasn't, I'll just throw this out there for you just so you know this. The foundation of our faith really does lie in this one event, and that's the resurrection. Our faith is really founded on this. It's really not the teachings of Jesus. You know, I mean, every religion has teachings of somebody. It's not a philosophy of life. It's not a worldview. It's really not any of those things. I'll be honest, it's not even really his death. I mean, every great religious leader has died. And many people died on the cross. It doesn't mean the cross didn't hold some significance for us, but it is not the foundation. It is not the thing that everything hinges on and rests on. It is in the one event. It is in this event of the resurrection that changed everything. It didn't just change some things. It changed everything. And without it, I'll show you what Paul was the guy who wrote a lot of the New Testament. I'll show you what Paul says in a letter to the church in Corinth. It says this: if Christ has not been raised from the dead, then our preaching is useless and our faith is useless. He puts such an emphasis on the fact that, look, if it wasn't for the resurrection, if it isn't for this thing that changed everything, that really your faith, you can believe all you want to, but it's useless. There's nothing else for you. And I look at it and go, you know, it's really Jesus' fault. I mean, he spent 3 years of his ministry really placing all, he was a horrible delegator. He placed it all on him, right? He said, it's all about me. It's all about God through me. It's all here. It rests on my shoulders, so that when he said these words, it is finished, when he said it's done, it might as well have been the end of a movie credit. You know, when it hangs in the sky, the end, right? And it might as well have been those words, because as far as they were concerned, it was over. As far as they were concerned, it was finished, like as in the end. And there was nothing else. The dream died, the movement died, everything he taught died with him. It was in the event, it was in the resurrection that everything just came to life. It put punctuation on everything that Jesus came to do, everything that he said, and it really resurrected all of that as well. And just throw it out there, that is a foundational part of our faith. And I don't know about you, this is kind of where I want to go today. We're at the end of a series called It Is, and I'll kind of recap, if you weren't here the last 2 weeks, the best I can in just a few minutes. But, you know, a lot of us, I don't know if you've been around church for a long time. I was raised in the church. A lot of us start out usually pretty strong in our relationship with God. Whether we came to him as an adult or as a kid. Sometimes it's real simple. I mean, I was a kid, and the Sunday school teacher said, do you want to go to hell? And I said, no, right? And then she said, well, pray this prayer. And I said, done. You know what I'm saying? So it starts out sometimes very simple. And what happens over the years, and it just still happens to me, is that things tend to get a little complicated. Things get a little more confusing. Things get a little bit more, you get a part, and it doesn't matter if it's hard to blame churches, but it is sometimes churches or denominations, or maybe it's family members or people in your life and spouses, people who, they all just emphasize something different. And really, our lives are already complex. Our lives are already complicated. So many people resist the church, and they resist the message of Jesus because of the way it's expressed to them, because it doesn't remain simple. It doesn't remain something just foundational in your life. And we just go, why would we want to add something more? My life's already confusing. Why would I want to add that to my life? Why would I want to add that complexity to my already complex life? And so today we're going to look at those words, it is finished, because I believe Jesus came, and when he rose from the dead, he gave new meaning, and he helped us see, what did he mean when he said that? What was finished there? And then I want to give you an example of something that Paul wrote. We'll look at a lot of Paul's writing today in terms of how that really changed everything. And so as a way of recapping, I'll just kind of briefly set you up for the context of what we were dealing with in terms of this time frame for Jesus. Because even though it gets complicated for us, it really wasn't any different for Jesus. Okay, when he showed up on the scene, the faith that God had given man, we're talking about the faith that God had given Abraham and Moses and some of the people in the Old Testament, the faith that he delivered to us with the instructions and the love, even all of that had become corrupt. Even all of that had become perverted. Even all of that had become so rule-based that by the time Jesus showed up, it was just like any other religion. It just had God at the top of it. That's it. And so when Jesus showed up and he said it was finished, he really did mean something very significant. So I'm going to give you this word just so that you have it in your mind, as we're going to talk about it a couple times today. I want you to see this phrase, the religious system. I try to find a word that hopefully would be as universal as I could possibly make it. But when Jesus showed up, God's religion, if you would, fell right into this kind of universal idea of a religious system. And all religious systems have these components. All right, you could add one or take one away, but they have these components. All religions. It could be a modern day cult. All right, it could go all the way back to the Romans and to the ancient Egyptians. Okay, all of them have these essential components. There's always sacred places, right? There's temples and mosques and shrines and there's patches of dirt and there's mountains. There's sacred places. There's sacred places where maybe God rests or God dwells, or there were statues at some point, in different. There's always something there. And that's where you have to go, or that's where you have to, there's cities and there's whole countries that people consider to be sacred. There were sacred texts, which is not just in terms of importance, but sacred texts from light of the fact that, it was kind of secretive and preserved, but it always needed somebody to interpret it. Some of it wasn't really accessible to everybody. It was kind of sacred. It was kind of held close to the chest, and it took people to interpret it for you, which is why there was always sacred men, right? I mean, and trust me, ladies, there's always been men. Am I right? There's always been men throughout the course of history. They're always the one that get to say, well, here's what it means. And here's what it tells you. And they're the ones that are always interceding and kind of telling you how you're doing and whether it's good or bad, and talking to God for you and really being that person to let you know how you're doing, which in return really creates superstitious followers. That the people who are a part of those religions and a part of the religious system really don't know how they're doing. They really don't know how they're doing. They think they're doing okay, but they don't really know. They can't have any confidence because they have to trust the sacred man who's consulting the sacred text at the sacred place. And it doesn't matter what religion. I mean, look, there's people in the Middle East right now, worshiping at a sacred place and hearing leaders, sacred men that they believe are telling them what the text says to do, that if you strap this bomb to you, if you go and do this, that you'll be okay with Allah. You'll be just fine. And they just superstitiously say, well, then I'm just going to give it a try. I'm going to hope for the best. Every religion falls into this religious system, this universal idea, and it wasn't any different with God's religion. It wasn't any different with what God had given man. Man had put into the religious system machine. They had the temple, and they had high priests, and some of these things God ordained because he wanted there to be a way to point to Christ. But it became all about them. It became just really corrupt, and this is what Jesus came. And when he said it's finished, I believe he was saying, because the message that he taught, the words that he would say, what we read from him and through the New Testament, he would just take out all of this. He would say, there's no more sacred places. Matter of fact, when Jesus died on the cross, it says that even the temple, the veil was torn from top to bottom. The thing that separated God, the presence of God, the Spirit of God from man was gone. And then Jesus would look and say, the Spirit's coming to indwell you. And Paul would later on say that your bodies are the temple. No matter where you are, just never mistaken the fact that no matter where you stand or what place you're in, you will never be in any place or on any dirt more sacred than the person to your left or to your right. There are no more sacred places. And the text is no longer going to be hidden close to the chest. It's not going to be something. Paul would say the mystery of the gospel has been revealed now because of who Jesus is. It wouldn't need interpretation. It would just be delivered to people. Everybody could read it. Everybody could get something from it. No more sacred men. No more high priests needed to be the propitiation for your sin. No high priest needed to intercede for you for God. Hebrews would tell us Jesus was it. He was the last one. And no more superstitious followers. We read in the New Testament, and Jesus was helping them understand, you can know this with confidence. He told his disciples, he said, I'm going to be with you till the end of the age. Hebrews says our faith is something that's confidence in what is unseen, certainty. There's no superstition involved. We would read that really when he said it's finished, he was really pointing to this old way. This religious system is done. And then he said, I've come to give you a new way. This is what we've been talking about in our series. It is. David a couple weeks ago said, redemption is coming. It is coming. Redemption is coming through me, Jesus would say. And he'd say, it's coming through me, and it's a new way. And it's not that the old way didn't have importance, but it's done. Okay, it's finished. It's not that I'm discounting it. Think about it from a punctuation standpoint. It wasn't like we're going to scratch a line through it because it doesn't matter anymore. It has a period to it, means it's done. So Jesus would even say it this way. He said, don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them. I came to what? Fulfill them. I came to finish them. That's my job. He says there's a new way. Redemption is coming in a way that's going to reconnect you with God. No longer has to be at a sacred place or through a sacred person. It's going to be something for you that you can read, and the text itself, the living word of God, will be in your hands. And you don't have to be superstitious anymore. It was a new covenant. If you weren't here last week, Don set up you have to go watch it on TV, on the computer if you wanted the streaming thing. Don had the table with the Passover. He had those really cool silver goblets. I want one of those to take home. They had those really cool silver goblets. He talked about the Passover celebration and what did it mean? When Jesus said, this is a new covenant that I'm telling you. When you eat this bread and you drink this wine, you're going to do this in remembrance of me. You're going to change all of it. There's a new promise that's been given to you. It's the last one, and it's in me. And then he would also say to them several times, there's a new command I'm giving you. This religious system is finished. There's a new command I'm giving you. Several times he would say it several different ways. Love your neighbors yourself. Love others, or love one another. He would say it several different ways. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and strength. And love your neighbor yourself. The second is equal to the first, meaning they're kind of two phrases, but they're one thing. There was a new command. Matter of fact, John says it this way: a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. This was right at the end. These were his final words to his group of guys. And if they didn't get the modeling of his life, he had just washed their feet. Okay, and you don't know about this about men, but men's feet are disgusting. You know what I'm saying? Like, he had just washed their feet and said, look, I'm telling you to this degree I'm modeling for you. You're going to love others. You're going to love one another. This is the command I'm giving you. And then there was a new movement. We see several times, especially when he was talking to Peter. One time they were talking about, Jesus said, well, who do others say that I am? And he said, I think you're the Messiah. You're Christ. You're the Son of God. He looks at Peter and he says, hey, on that right there, on that declaration, Peter, I'm going to build my church. I'm going to build it. And the word we get there is ecclesia. And it's really, and what Jesus was saying, we get the word church, and that's a German word that was kind of put into the English language. A German translation actually means house of prayer. Okay, church was a German word, and sometimes that affects us because we think of church, we think of a building or a place or location. But Jesus really was saying, ecclesia really means congregation or movement of people. It's a gathering, if you will. On this right here, on who I am, I'm going to have a new movement. It's going to be a new way with a new covenant, a new promise, fueled by a new command. There's a new movement happening. So the question that we have is, what happened? Right? What happened? When things start out that simply, when things start out, maybe in your life, that simply, why do things get really complex? Why do things get confusing? Why is it that everywhere we turn, every Christian radio station we listen to, or sermon you hear, or church you're invited to, maybe you're here this morning, God told you to, they take you to lunch, and you decided to come for Easter, because that's what just everybody does, What happened? Because you're so tired of hearing people emphasize what they think is the most important thing, or what they think is right, or what they think is the rule you should be following, or the convictions you should have. Why is it so complex? What is it about the church and Christianity that became so resistible when it never started out that way? Never started out that way. Well, the example I want to give today as we finish is, and look at that word is finished. I want to give the example that Paul had with a particular group, a particular church. Paul, I can't give you his full backstory, but Paul basically, in the later part of his life, was a missionary. He would go and plant these little ecclesias, these little Jesus movements, these little gatherings. He would go plant them all over the place. And Gentile areas means non-Jewish. You go to these Gentiles and say, hey, this is who Jesus is, and it's all about grace, and it's all about love, and it's all about what he did for you. He died and he rose again and he lives with power. That's for you, and let's come. And so people were just flocking because their religious systems weren't working. Religious systems never work. So they were so tired of that. They were weary of those religious systems. And so they were coming to this new movement, this new way with a new covenant. And they were coming, and then Paul would leave. And then when he would leave, as sometimes happened, there were these other missionaries or people who'd show up, and they'd go to one of the gatherings. They'd go to somebody's life group. They'd go to somebody's house. They'd go to a church service. And they would hear us talking about Jesus, and they'd be like, yeah, that's me. And this particular group, in Galatia, there were some Jewish Christians that came. They're called Judaizers. And they would come, and they'd say, that's awesome. Hey, listen, Paul might have been in a hurry on his way out. Everything that you're saying is true, but you know what? There's one more thing. You have to be circumcised. Because Jesus was Jewish. And, that was a part of the Jewish custom. That was a part of the Jewish symbol that they belonged to God. Like, you need to be circumcised. Hey, it's awesome that the Gentiles get to be a part of it. But listen, you need to do this. After all, Jesus did it for you. He died for you. You can get a little snip for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was, for men, that was a big deal. You need to do this. This is part of it. And they just started to add to the message that Paul had already given them. And making it a little bit more confusing, making it a little bit more complex. And so Paul hears about this, and he gets passionate. He's very passionate about the gospel, very passionate about what he's doing. And he hears that he gets a little angry. And he writes a letter back to the whole movement, the whole church of Galatia. Okay, all the people that would read it there in that region. He writes a letter to them. It's called the book of Galatians. If you want to turn in your Bible, you have, or on your phone, or whatever you want to be. We're going to look at a few verses and walk through that in Galatians chapter 5 today. But Paul would do this, and again, probably well-intended Jewish Christians coming along and saying, hey, this is all great. We love Jesus too, but you know what? Jesus is just an extension of the Old Testament. And they began to kind of preach a gospel of kind of religious system 2.0. And Paul writes back to try to address this issue, because it's not just an issue we have today. It's an issue even in that moment, even as close to that was to the time of Christ's resurrection. They began to deal with it even then. And here's how Paul addressed it. Let's start in Galatians 5. We're going to go to Galatians 5:1. And we'll start there. And he says these words. It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Now, I love this verse. This is one of those ones I've kind of committed to memory. But when he makes that statement, look, it's for freedom that Christ sets you free. This is important. I don't know everybody's story in this room, but here's the deal. If your version of Christianity, or the ones that you've encountered, if it doesn't say freedom, and if it doesn't make you feel more free, you're doing it wrong, okay? Or they're doing it wrong. He didn't say, don't let yourself be burdened again by another yoke. Okay, this isn't a situation of let's trade out these chains for these ones, right? Let's change out these rules for these rules. He said that's not why he came. As a matter of fact, you need to come to the next series, I'll tell you about later, but called Who Changed the Rules. We're actually talking about that specifically when it comes to relationships here at our church. It's just, it's a big deal. That Jesus really came for freedom, to set us free. And he says, look, that's why he came. So every time it gets a little confusing for you, or your Christianity, your Christian walk gets a little complex, you need to figure out what those chains are. Why are you putting them on yourselves? Why are others trying to put them on you? He says, don't do that. Don't burden yourself. Don't let it happen to you. And here's why he's saying that. Here he goes. He says this. He says, mark my words, I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourselves, hear these words, if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be of no value to you. If you let yourself be circumcised, Christ is of no value to you at all. Again, I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the whole law. I'll explain that in a minute. You who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. Now, this seems really extreme. These are extreme words that Paul decides to use here, but this is a big deal to him. He said, look, I know it's a little surgery, but look, I'm telling you what, and even if you're willing to do it, I'm telling you this. And listen, circumcision, we don't get circumcision because, we do get circumcision. We don't understand the context of the importance this is. But why don't you go ahead and put it, whatever else in your mind that someone has ever told you is more important. Okay? Oh yeah, I know you believe in Jesus, but this. I know that you say you're a Christian, but do you have this conviction? I know you say you're a follower of Christ, but have you been baptized? I know you say you're a follower of Jesus, but, so whatever that blank is for you, whatever that but is, that either you believe or you've been caused to believe or someone's put on you, just put those words in there. And Paul's saying, look, whoever lets that happen, the whole message of Christ is of no value to you. Matter of fact, those who let it happen, guess what? You have alienated yourself from him. And I said, well, that's extreme. He said, no, that's what you've done. I know you think it's just one thing, but it's not. It's not. You have removed yourself from grace. And I'll give you a quick example that I heard from a pastor in Oklahoma. I love this example. This is just very good visual for me. Imagine, if you will, and you're free to do this if you'd like, you were to give me a gift card, okay, like about $100. Just so you know, I like the Apple Store, just throwing it out there. Let's say you were to give me a gift card, about $100, okay? And now you were to say, hey, Matt, here's a gift. I just want to give it to you. And I said, that's awesome. That's so great. Oh, $100, that's great. That's really great. Hey, let me give you something for that. Let me give you $50. And you said, no. No, I just want you to have it. Hey, I appreciate it. That's awesome. Hey, let me give you $25. You're like, no. All right, just give me $25. You do understand that is no longer a gift card. That's a discount card, right? Everybody nod your head if you're with me. That's a discount card. That's not a gift card anymore. You have removed the gift from the card. And here's Paul saying, look, I know you think it's just one thing. I know you think that it's not that big a deal. I know that you've been told that it's everything plus this, and that shouldn't be that big a deal. But I'm telling you, you add that one thing to this message, you add that one thing to this mix, and you have removed yourself from the grace of God doing it all for you. It is no longer a gift. It's just a discount. Keep going. Matter of fact, he says this, through the Spirit we eagerly await for the faith of the righteousness for which we hope. This is the righteousness we hope for. In Christ, Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. See, he's arguing like, look, it doesn't really matter. That's never mattered. He's not arguing the physical thing about circumcision. Like, he's not saying if you have that done, you're in trouble. Like, we'd all be in trouble, most of us, So it's like, it's not that big a deal. He says, but I want you to understand the why behind it. In Christ, it doesn't mean anything. And then he goes on to make this huge declaration. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Now, for the people that were maybe new to this message, that might have just been a reminder of what they'd already heard. To the Jewish Christians, they would have really struggled. Because when you view Jesus as an extension of the Old Testament, when you view him as just sort of a religious system 2.0, you're like, no. There's 614 rules that count. Like there's all sorts of priorities, Matt. There's all sorts of these things. And I know people who have grown up in church, they hate verses like this. Because they have grown up and everything becomes a priority, and every belief and every situation, every rule becomes equally important. And Paul makes this tremendously emphatic statement, the only thing that counts is your faith expressing itself. Okay, your faith, your trust in God, that he's done everything for you. Expressing itself, the Greek there is really just kind of wringing it out, working it out. Okay, physically, just tangible. Through love, and the word love there is a contextual word that talks about love out, love others, loving to someone else. That's the only thing that counts. I don't know where you are. I don't know how you've been raised, but even you read a verse like that, you go, that's awesome. No, there's other things that count. And I'm with you. Listen, other things are important. There's several things, but when you start talking about foundational things, you start talking about the simplicity of what Jesus has done. It doesn't mean that this verse gives us any less responsibility. But he says, no, this is the only thing that has value. This is the only thing that counts. This is the only thing that matters is your faith expressing itself, working it out through love for other people. If you've been on a journey for a while, hopefully you've heard this, you've maybe heard us talk about this, but we are, one of the ways that it's very difficult for us as a church to try to keep the simple stuff simple. Because we're an organization just like anybody else. There's rules and there's things we have to do, and we try to organize things and control things, and we're horrible at it, by the way, so, just don't judge us. But we try to keep things as simple as we possibly can. And one of the ways that we take this to heart is even in our mission is to humbly point everyone to absolute hope. Even in our mission and vision of the things we want to see happen. For example, I'll give you these numbers. These are numbers we threw out in January as a church. We want to plant 3 campuses. We just feel like we're called to do that. We're going to have an interest meeting in a few weeks, actually, for an area that we feel like in Lake Norman we're called to go to. So we're going to start that process pretty quickly. We want to see 3,000 stories changed by the absolute hope that we're pointing people to of Jesus. We want to see those stories and be better storytellers ourselves. We really want to get engaged with stories that are important and watch how God incrementally is changing people's lives. We already have over 200 plus stories that have been shared, mainly at our partner nights and through emails and stuff we did in the God series this last a few weeks ago. And then we want to see 300,000. That's $300,000 that we reinvest back into the Lake Norman community because we feel like they're worth it. Like we're here for a reason. We want to reinvest those funds back into and really help raise the funds within our community to help people know through our strategic partners that are helping people with real needs that this is who Jesus is and he loves them, and it's a part of bringing hope to Lake Norman. And why do we do that? Why is this important to us? It's important to us as a church because, it doesn't make any difference to anybody else what we believe if it's not expressing itself in love to others. It honestly makes no difference to anybody else, the convictions we have, if it's not being expressed to others while we love others as we love ourselves. He says the only thing that matters, is this faith expressing itself in love. And then he goes on to say this. You are running such a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? He's like, and then maybe you felt this way, you're personally yourself. Man, it started out so simply. I didn't want to go to hell, right? I mean, it's just like, it started out so easy. And he's saying the words, who cut in on you? Who came in with all these extra things? Who piled on the rules? Who piled on the expectations? Who came in and said, yeah, that's important, but there's all this other stuff that's just as important. He goes on to say this. That kind of persuasion, I love this word persuasion, because it usually means it's a sell. The stuff that people have to really sell you on, the stuff they have to guilt you on, the stuff they have to bring condemnation to you on, that kind of sale does not come from the one who calls you. It doesn't come from Christ. A little yeast works its way through the whole batch of dough. He uses this visual example for them to understand, look, you guys need to understand something. A little bit of the wrong thing corrupts the whole thing. I know that you just think you're going to sprinkle in this little thing, this little rule, this little conviction. You're going to bring this thing to importance. I know you think you're just going to add this one thing, but I'm telling you, just like yeast, this single fungus, whatever yeast is, this little fungus, single cell fungus, it's going to ruin the whole, it's going to corrupt and ruin the whole thing. Look, a little bit of judgment corrupts the whole thing. A little bit of gracelessness, a little bit of legalism, a little bit of any of the religious system in your life in terms of following Christ corrupts his message. It corrupts the whole thing. I know you and I don't think that way. We like to compartmentalize it. But Paul's like, no, you need to understand this. It's a big deal. He goes on to say this. In 12, he goes on, because this is where he kind of gets angry. So cover the kids' ears real quick, okay? As for those agitators, he's talking about the Jewish, the Judaizers. He says, as for those agitators, you know what? I wish they would just go the whole way. That's what what he's saying? If they're going to start cutting, I wish they would just cut it off. That's what he says right there. You need to read the Bible more. It's awesome. All right, and emasculate themselves. It's like, I wish they would hurt themselves. This is Paul, angry. He's saying, look, I know you don't think it's that big a deal. You have no idea the lasting consequences of this. I wish they would just go on and hurt themselves. You have no clue. He would say to many churches in the West, you have no clue what you have done. The lasting consequences of the gracelessness and the legalism and the prosperity gospel and the judgment that you have sprinkled in to your following Christ, you have no clue what the lasting consequences are going to be. And Paul just knew. Not that he foreknew it, not that he had that kind of power, but Paul was Mr. Religious System, okay? I can't give you all of Paul's backstory, but he was the Pharisee of Pharisees. Just telling you, he was they in the church terms, okay? That's who he was. And he knew that if you bring in this to following Jesus, here's what's going to happen. It's going to create leaders who are self-righteous. How many know some of those outside of myself? It's going to create leaders who they can't even be honest about their own life because they have to hold themselves up on the pedestal that you created. It's going to create followers who are hypocrites. It's going to create a group of people who are going to have to say one thing, but are going to live completely different lives. And they're going to have no choice but to be hypocritical. He also knew the text would get manipulated. He knew that people were going to have those arguments. Well, it doesn't really mean that. It doesn't really say that. You got to look at the Greek. That's not really what it means. I don't know the Greek, but I'm pretty sure that's not what it means. Right? That we were going to spend our time looking for loopholes and dumbing down the text. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus came in and jacked it up. He jacked the standard up. Nobody could reach it. He said, what was it? Murder. He says, look, you think you kill somebody, it's murder? I say if you even have a bad thought about somebody, murder. Right? Lust. You think if you act on your lust, that's lust? I say if you even have the thought, it's lust. Jesus came in and jacked it up. Raised that standard so high that nobody could reach it. He said, look, Paul's like, I know what's going to happen. Text is going to get manipulated. We're going to dumb it down, and we're going to look for loopholes, and it's going to create more hypocrisy and more self-righteousness. And the end result, people are going to get mistreated. How many of you have ever been mistreated by someone who calls themselves a Christian? Right? A little bit of religious system thinking that finds its way into your heart, that finds its way into your life, is going to eventually corrupt the message of grace, the foundational truth of what we believe and what the Bible teaches us. He goes on to say this. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. He didn't just deliver freedom for you, but he's calling you constantly out to be free. Do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather serve one another humbly in love. Look, this is a big deal for freedom. People have different ideas of freedom. And I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to offend all of you in just a minute. But freedom is not what you think. It's not the word, it's not the definition that we've come up with. This sort of, hippie, tolerant, laid back, love wins garbage, okay? It's not that at all. That is not freedom. If you think freedom is just doing whatever you want to do, you don't know who Jesus is. He says, look, he called you to be free. You got to work it out. You got to work it out humbly, serving those others humbly in love. And again, he goes back and echoes Jesus' words. He just says, look, why is this important? The entire law is fulfilled. It's finished. The entire law, it is finished, is keeping the one commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Paul looks at the complexity that was coming into that church and just says, look, he not only addresses it, but he comes back and says, you need to remember what you're called to do, who you're called to be, the freedom and the hope that he came to bring you. Because it's all finished. He came, look, the very same things that you and I resist, Jesus resisted too. And he came to finish it. He came to fulfill it. When he said those words, it is finished, he meant it. It's up to you and I. It's up to you and I how we allow those things to come into our lives, how we allow people to bring complexity and confusion to the simple message of what it is to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. and to love others as much as we love ourselves. He said, in all of that, the law and the prophets are fulfilled. In all of that, I declare everything else is finished. You know, the best way, I wrote this down just because I knew I'd forget it. Really, the resurrection, it's best celebrated by doing the one thing that matters. Our faith expressing itself through love. You want to celebrate the day? You want to celebrate what he's done for you? You can come here and sing. That's awesome. You can come do your thing. That's great. But how do you best express it? How do you best celebrate this day? You do what he's called you to do. You remove the crud and the confusion from your life and from the religion that you think you've been following. You pull it away and you say, I'm going to do the one thing that matters, the one thing that has value. I want my trust in God to work itself out and express it to others in love. Now again, I don't know everybody's story. I don't know where you are. Maybe it's you. Maybe you just are naturally this way. You sort of pile on more and more and more expectations on yourself and rules, and it's maybe started out really simply for you, but it's gotten really complicated. In your life as a Christian, you have felt like nothing but a failure. You are so weary of that. Maybe somebody else put those things on you. Maybe somebody else, you're worried about the judgment of others and the gracelessness of others, and people have come to you and said, I know you say you believe in Jesus, but you haven't done anything else, and you haven't fulfilled all these other things, and you're just tired of it. You're weary of it. Many of you guys have resisted. You've resisted Christianity. You've resisted the call to follow Christ because of all those extra things. I'm telling you, that is not what Jesus came for. Jesus came to declare that junk was done. That stuff was finished on the cross. And the resurrection put a punctuation on all of it. I love these words. Jesus would say to a crowd one day, especially the crowd he was talking to, the context of this. He would actually say this: are you tired, worn out? Are you burned out on religion? This is the Message paraphrase. Are you burned out on religion? He's talking to the religious followers of the day. Maybe you know these words where he says, Come you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Remember that word yoke that Paul used? Take my yoke, he says, upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest. You'll find peace for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden that I give you is light. This is red letter stuff, okay? This is Jesus' words. He said, look, the yoke that I give you is light. Why? Because I'm going to do it all for you. That's why. The burden I give you is light because it's a responsibility. There is something on you. There's a responsibility on you, but it's not huge. It's demanding, but it's not heavy. It's not something you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do on your own. These are his words. And that easy yoke, his easy yoke really comes from us just doing one thing, and that's surrender. Surrendering our lives to him. Surrendering our path and agenda to him. Surrendering the things that we've tried to do to do this on our own. Just surrender to him. Surrender all that extra junk that people have been throwing on you. You've been wearing. You've been allowing people to make it more confusing than it should be. You surrender that to him. Many of you need to take a first step in surrendering your life to Christ. Many more of you probably need to just need a fresh start. You're like, man, I'm with you. Man, it started out so simple. And my thirst for God and my passion and my love was alive. And then something happened. Religious systems started to affect everything. It started out with just one little rule. It started out with just one little add-on. It started out with just one little thing, but it corrupted the whole heart. And you need a fresh start. You just need to say, God, I surrender all of that garbage to you. Help me start new. On the foundation of this faith, which is your resurrection, it changed everything. And let my faith, it may not be, it will continue to mature. That's just what the Bible tells us. It will continue to mature, but let my faith that matures, the trust that I have in you, may it grow, and may it really work itself out the way it's supposed to, in the way I love others. Let's pray together this morning. Then we're going to sing and worship in just a minute. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for who you are, what you've done in our lives, and how you've called us to be yours. God, I just pray for everyone in the room today as we just move to a place of surrender, that you would just begin to move in our hearts. And as we're praying, I'll just say, or I'll just ask, if there's anybody here that's you're just tired. You're tired of doing it on your own. You're tired of resisting. You need to take that first step. You need to just surrender your life to him. Would you just raise your hand? I want to pray with you and for you. Would you just raise your hand? If there's anybody here that just needs a fresh start, man, you're so tired of religion. You can't even see straight. You want a fresh start. You need to surrender all of the stuff that you have put on your shoulder and allowed to be put on your shoulders. You need to surrender it back to God. Would you raise your hand so I can pray with you and for you? It's good. You want a fresh start in this. It's good. God, for those that raise their hand today that just need to take that first step, just have them pray in their hearts as we pray together as a church. God, I surrender all to you. I receive the gift of grace, of salvation, of your blood that was poured out for me, God, to set me free. I want that yoke. I want that burden because it's light, because you did it all for me. There's nothing for me to do except surrender my heart to you. God, receive those prayers today. God, for everybody else that raised their hand that just need a fresh start, I'm there with them, God. Continue to move in our hearts that we would not allow things to become more complicated than they need to be. That we would keep our hearts and faith rooted in our foundations, rooted in the things that matter most. God, because of that, because of who you are, in light of who you are, our faith would express itself in love to others. Give us a fresh start. For the rest of us, God, as we just move into a time of worship and surrender back to you, our hearts to you, we thank you for this amazing day to celebrate your resurrection. In your name, Jesus, amen.
We hope you've enjoyed your experience with Journey today. If you would like to invest in the mission and ministry of Journey Church, you can easily give by going to thejourneyonline.com/give. Also, if you've been changed by Absolute Hope, we want to hear your story. Please take a quick moment to share your story by writing to stories@thejourneyonline.com. Thanks again for watching.